What am I saying again?
This is MPW.
MPW.
The podcast.
With your host,
Xylo Aria. Cool.
A podcast about music production
for the everyday musician,
where we learn from experienced studio engineers and each other.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the MPW podcast. I'm your host, Xylo Aria, and today we are super lucky to be chatting to Hannah V. So Hannah is a producer and songwriter, and she has worked with loads of incredible artists, including Stormzy, JP Cooper, and Toby. Also has an extensive career in keyboard performance with artists including Rihanna, Jessie J, Eminem, and loads more. So such a pleasure to have you with us, Hannah. How are you doing?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. It's so amazing being part of this platform. And yeah, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So it's morning there for you, I guess late morning. So what's your morning been like?
Good, actually. I got up, I did my prayers, I did my meditation, I had my coffee, I had my hot water, I did my little 20 minutes of exercise. Morning routine is important for me. And even though I don't every day, I don't get to do it, I try and be pretty mindful of how I start my days,
Yeah. Wow. What a gun. That's great, Hannah. I'm a big fan of meditation in the morning, especially, but it's a hard thing I find to cultivate a habit of. So
Completely. And so we just got to try our best. But I really noticed like a big change in my life when I started having a regular morning routine. It's just nice to have an hour for yourself in the morning, whatever your routine it is, to like have something that you do before, because especially in our jobs are so crazy. And the second the emails start popping off and the phone calls start, that's it. You're done. You're in the hole, So just having a bit of time to kind of gather yourself and just be like, okay, cool. Now let's start the day is important.
I love that. What's your ideal time for your morning routine?
If I usually wake up around 8:30 or something like that. So like 8:30 to 9:30 or 9 to 10, that kind of thing around that is my ideal time.
That's good. I think an hour is it sounds accessible, because I think some people have really extensive morning routines, and then you just hear that and you're like, you must be a machine, but like I could never ever achieve that.
Of course. And that's the thing, as we all know, like if I have to be somewhere in the morning, then that gets cut down to 20 minutes or 30 minutes or nothing at all if I'd rather be in bed for a bit longer. So we have to be flexible as well, and life does get in the way, so I don't beat myself up. But if I don't have a morning, if I've got the morning free, I definitely try and do my routine.
Not beating yourself up, another really good habit, because I think we all do too much of that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, today we are talking about sort of creativity and a few other things, but I am really interested to hear about your journey into getting into production, because I guess you've done quite a few different things. You started with performing and being a jazz pianist, and then touring, and then getting into production. So can you tell me a little bit more about your background and how you got to doing what you're doing now?
Absolutely. I feel I've had like so many different careers in music. It's so crazy, So I started out, I was classically trained as a kid. In fact, I had piano lessons in India. That was when I lived in India for a couple of years when I was a kid. That's where I started with piano lessons. Moved back to Germany and continued with piano lessons. And this was classical piano lessons. And I loved it. I honestly loved it. I got to a competing level. And yeah, something about the piano always just really spoke to me. My parents didn't have to force me to practice or anything like that. I just loved it. I then went to an international school, which I was very fortunate to attend because it had a really big music section, So there were choirs I was playing in and bands I was playing in. And that's where I got introduced to jazz by my big band teacher. And then all of a sudden, my life kind of took a different path. And I fell in love with jazz. And so I really wanted to become a jazz musician. And again, I was really lucky that I went to school with friends that had similar interests. I think that's a really important thing too, to practice with your friends, to like go to someone's basement and practice and have bands when you're young and sound pretty crap, but it doesn't matter because, you're just getting into being a musician, like the life of a musician, and I clocked up so many performance hours back then, which is kind of amazing because you learn through the mistakes on stage, right? That's how you learn how to keep calm, you learn about the poker face, you learn when everything's literally crumbling around you. And I played in church a lot as well, So yeah, performance doesn't teach you just about playing. It teaches you about all the possible situations that can happen. Keyboards breaking down, the sheet music being the wrong sheet music in front of you and you're just having to freestyle. Your page turner, back in the day when I was playing a lot of classical piano, you have a page turner, your page turner just messing it up, all these kind of crazy situations. So I fell in love with jazz, decided I wanted to be a jazz musician. And so I came to London to study at the Royal Academy of Music. And so I studied jazz there 4 years. But while I was there, it's kind of something in me slightly changed because as much as I loved jazz and instrumental music, I always loved vocal music. I loved listening to pop songs. I loved listening to the radio. I loved listening to hip hop and R&B. I loved hanging out with singers. I always, especially through church, I was always working with singers. And I think especially pianists, we have a special relationship with singers because we accompany them a lot, And so I feel like something in me always knew that I wanted to not just do jazz, So anyways, I graduated from the academy, wanted to stay in London. And as so many young musicians know, had to get like a million different jobs because it's London and you're not going to go straight from uni to like having amazing gigs and being able to pay your rent with music. That wasn't my reality, And so I taught music, I taught piano, I played in loads of different bars and restaurants. I had a proper part-time job as well. I was a secretary, as a pretty good PA actually. So if the music thing doesn't work out, I know I've got good secretary skills. And, you do what you have to do to make it work, At one point, one of my friends from the Royal Academy called me up and said, Hannah, I'm putting a band together for a pop artist. Can you play keys on it? And I'd never played keyboards. But another thing I learned is like sometimes you just say yes and you figure it out. I was honest to him because he was a friend. And I said, listen, I haven't really played keyboards. And he's like, don't worry about it. There's another keyboard player there who's also a friend. He'll show you the ropes. But then you just say yes, you just get thrown. Like the many times in my career I've been thrown into the deep end and it's scary. There's nothing scarier than saying yes to someone and knowing, whoa, I've never actually done this. But you know what? That's when you like go to the library or open Google and learn real fast. It is what it is, So I got this gig for an artist, singer called Xylo Church, who was actually a classical singer but had moved into pop. And that was my first introduction to like kind of pop session keyboard playing. And I loved it. I really took to it. I loved the rehearsals. I loved how precise the rehearsals were, how precise the interpretations of the tracks were. It was very different to being a jazz musician where you kind of have a rehearsal, you practice 25 songs and you just play them. Whereas in pop, it's like you do 1 or 2 songs a day. And, you really go into the details of the sounds and the fills and the arrangements. And I just kind of took to it, And so quite fast, I became proficient. And I learned how to program and, I got good gear. I was lucky to be endorsed by Yamaha quite early on in my career. And so I started climbing up the session musician ladder, even though I don't like the whole ladder thing. But I started getting more gigs, And, so I did this for about 7, 8 years with my biggest gigs being I was Rihanna's keyboard player for a year. I was Jessie J's keyboard player for 3 years. I played for Anastasia, the Sugar Babes, Jason Derulo, Jay Sean, like really so many different artists. And I was so blessed to, do world tours. So I've played some amazing stages. I played Wembley Stadium. I did the O2 in London like 20 times. I did Madison Square Gardens. I did Staples Center with Eminem being our special guest. Like crazy stuff, and with not only the stages, you get to see the world, all across the States, all across Europe, of course, Australia, Asia, and you get to see these wonderful places in the world. And for me, I think, especially because, I'm a third culture kid. Traveling is in my blood anyways. I love meeting people and, like experiencing different countries and food and all of that. It's something that, is a special thing for me. And to be able to do that on the job was incredible. And so I was doing this for 8 years when, I guess in my last year, something in my stomach and my belly just said, whoa, Hannah, is it time for a change? And it was a crazy thing because I was at the top of my game at this point. I was like one of the main keyboard players you'd call. But something in me just said, I'm ready for another challenge. And I think as creators, we get like that, and I kept thinking, like, is the rest of my life just going to be, a different pop star and me doing the same thing? And again, it sounds crazy because it's such an amazing life, but I missed being at home. When you're on big tours like that, you're gone kind of a minimum of 8 months a year. People at home stop missing you because you're always gone anyways, and there was something, I felt like a bit of a ghost. That's the only way I can explain it. You have these big experiences on the road, but then you come home, which is meant to be real life, and it doesn't feel real anymore. And yeah, and something in me was just thinking, I'm ready for my next challenge. And I'd always been kind of producing on the side. I'd learned from friends on the road, always had my computer with me, and kind of as a hobby was producing. But what happens so often when you put things out in the universe, and whatever your beliefs are, if it's karma, if it's faith, it doesn't matter. I put it out there. Very unexpectedly, I got a record deal with Sony. Totally unexpectedly. Completely out of the blue. I was going to put out a track. I sent it to somebody who sent it to somebody who sent it to somebody. And it was a small deal, it was it was a 2 single deal, but it was enough of an opportunity for me to say, I'm going to quit being a session musician. And that was a big and scary, and the craziest thing I've done in my life was make that move. Because the second I quit Jessie J, I got 4 world tours offered the next day, of other people that wanted me on, had been waiting for me to stop Jessie. And I said no, because I knew that if I was going to be as good of a producer as I was a pianist, I couldn't do it on the road. I couldn't do it in hotel rooms. I had to dedicate my life to it. It's the only way you get good at something. And when you say yes to some things, you immediately say no to a lot of other things. That just goes hand in hand with saying yes. And so it was really hard for me in the beginning, like packing up my suitcases, not being on the road, seeing everybody being on the road, and starting from scratch again. Because again, like, even though I had a record deal and all of that, like, I had to learn properly how to produce. I had to learn what it takes to be a producer. I had to build my reputation from the bottom up, because in studio world, nobody cared that I'd played with Rihanna. They kind of said, well, did you produce for her? It's like, no. It's like, well, then you got to start. And that was very humbling for me and hard. But, like, I kind of started again, built myself up, and I'm now in my 7th year of producing. And in hindsight, as hard as it was making the switch, and as hard as especially the first 3 years were, it was the best decision of my life, because I adore my life. I adore production. I love being part of the creation of tracks. I still can't believe that I now get to go to gigs and see people play my productions and my parts. It's all come full circle. And in a crazy way, I feel like my entire life has led me to this point, because it's all transferable skills, and all the lessons I learned on the road, I can so easily transfer to the studio. I love having a more normal life in many ways. I love having weekends off. I love, it's almost like being normal is like crazy, because I hadn't had it, it's a lifestyle that suits me. My life is definitely a lot less glamorous than it was before, like there's no more private jets and, fancy, super fancy hotels. But you know what? Privileged that I got to experience it. And I'm exactly where I'm meant to be right now in my life. So yeah, that was a long answer, but as you can tell, I can go on and on and on about this.
Oh, no. So much of that was just so lovely to hear, Hannah. And there's so many things in that. You were saying that you had a time where you were doing these amazing things and going on these tours and stuff, but then there was this other side that where real life didn't feel real anymore. And that's a challenge that I think for some people, I assume it's quite a difficult thing to deal with, and then kind of doing all that, and then taking that massive leap into something that was fairly unknown, and just going with the yes attitude, and just making it work for you is huge. And you know, one other thing that you mentioned of saying yes to things means saying no to other things. That's a really important thing as well, because I think sometimes people think that you can, you know, that they can do absolutely everything and then just burn out. And when that focus on the one thing that you want to do is so important. So that was amazing.
And I think, yeah, it's important to, like, you know, like, it's so easy to look at people that are doing great things and just assume that it's straightforward. It's not, you know, it's really, because I've also worked with, like, you know, really big artists and big stars, and they're there for a reason. You know, they're there because they worked really hard. And when I was with Rihanna for that year, in that year, she had 1 day off. And that's like, in 365 days, she had 1 day off. And that was her reality, you know? And she didn't moan about it. It was just her reality. It's just, it is what it is, you know? So hard work, man. There's no shortcuts to that, is there? You got to put in the time.
And that's a really good thing to hear as well, because I think sometimes it's easy, especially in music, when you feel like you're putting in so much, and you feel like the results are not that much. Sometimes it's humbling, and you need to hear that actually these people that are doing amazing things, although you're doing the best you can, they've worked really, really hard to get there, and it hasn't been an easy feat for anyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So no, that's awesome.
My name is Maria Caterina, I'm from Ecuador, and this episode is brought to you by MPW membership. Did you know that all MPW members get access to monthly feedback on their tracks from an industry audio professional? This is the perfect resource if you're almost finished with your track and need that professional ear to help you with the final touches. This is a free feature for all MPW members. Take advantage of this awesome function and so many more using the link musicproductionforwomen.com/membership.
And you were saying that you started learning to produce sort of on the road and that kind of thing, and then got better at that as you went. So would you say you're mostly self-taught, or did you after that go to learn, or how did you go about building
No,
that?
so production-wise, I'm 100% self-taught, but I say self-taught, but I had amazing friends that showed me. So it's not self-taught, you know. It's me, like, sitting next to my producer friends and just watching them for hours and hours and asking questions. To this day, I don't care. I will ask. I don't care if a question comes across as dumb or not. I will ask questions because I'm so keen to learn. Like, I love the art of production so much. And if I don't know something, I just pick up the phone to my amazing producer friends and just say, there's this one thing I can't figure out. Can you help me? You know? So I was, again, just fortunate that the circle around me, they were open and they shared their knowledge with me. And I do the same now in return. You know, like, music is meant to be that. It's an oral tradition. You know, we're meant to pass on what we learn. And so for me, it was just incredible to be around. So one of my biggest influences, I toured with a band called The Bugs in the Attic for a couple of years. And there are 9 producers, it's a collective of producers. They invented a sound called the broken beat sound. It's a very West London thing. And so when we were on the road, 4 of them were on the road with, you know, a couple of session musicians. So I was on the road with 4 producers. And so they produced in the tour bus. So I'd literally just sit down next to them and watch, and then be like, what are you doing there? What are you doing there? What are you doing there? And just ask questions, you know? And then they took me under their wing and they showed me how to do certain things as well. And so, yeah, it's I'm self-taught, but with the help of some amazing engineers and producers around me.
That's awesome. And that's good to hear as well, because I think sometimes people feel like you have to go and get a degree and spend, you know, years doing it that way. So it's good to know that you can be really resourceful and make the most of everything you have around you, and kind of teach yourself, but also tap into hopefully a few producers that you know to ask for help.
Exactly. And I don't think there's a right or wrong way, you know, like, I'm so happy that I went to the academy and studied piano. Like that was a really great thing that I did, So like, yeah, there's no right or wrong way. But you need to put in the work. You need to put in the hours, and you need to do your research, But thankfully nowadays, there's so much you can find online. There's so many lessons. There's so many producers kind of doing, explaining things. So if you want to become good at anything nowadays, I think it's slightly easier. The information is out there.
Yeah, there's so much you can tap into online these days. So another thing that I wanted to talk to you about, like you mentioned, your lifestyle has changed a lot since your touring days. And how does that change your working way or your work-life balance? Has that changed your routine?
Absolutely. Well, see, the thing is, when you're on the road, you're at the mercy of the schedule, right? If the artist is touring, you're touring. If the artist is taking a day off, you've got a day off. And that's just what it is. You don't make your own schedule. And in many ways, in one way, it means it's pretty easy because you don't have to think, right? You just like, you open up your emails or you look under your hotel room and there's a day sheet and that's what you do. But it also means that weekends don't exist, routine doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. And that was quite a hard lifestyle. And also with touring and the type of tours I used to do, you're flying in different time zones all the time, And so you're always tired. You got 4 a.m. hotel calls, you're at the airport, you're flying, you're doing this, you're doing that, you're straight on stage. You got to get the adrenaline up for the performance. Then right after stage, you jump on a tour bus to go somewhere else. Or, so I basically didn't even have the energy to come up with any kind of routine because I was just too tired. So kind of being in the studio and again, when I first started being a producer, I had to put in the hours, So I did work 7 days a week. I did do so many sessions. I didn't take days off because I had to learn. But now, and especially over the last 2 years, and you know what, especially over lockdown, it's made me realize that days off are so important, so important. So now my schedule is more or less when I can do it. I work Mondays to Fridays. I go to my studio in Hoxton, and I try and take Saturdays and Sundays off. I definitely take Sundays off. Of course, sometimes, some jobs need you to work longer, but having that schedule is so nice for me, being able to look forward to a weekend. And again, like I mentioned before, it's like being part of like society, being able to say Friday, or Boo Mondays. It's something about that, just being able to be part of something.
Yeah.
It's really nice for me. Yeah, I'm still like really gassed about that. And I don't think as creators we're good at work-life balance because we define ourselves by our work, which is not a good thing. And which we all struggle with. But I'm trying to be more than just Hannah the musician and Hannah the producer. And again, especially over lockdown, like I'm trying to get into more hobbies. And the one thing that I find hard about this lifestyle is when you're on the road, your social life is there, right? You hang out with people after the job, you go out with people on the job, it's just all there. Whereas now I have to actually make the effort and pick up the phone and meet my friends. And I'm still not quite there yet, because I'm having to practice organizing fun time, if that makes any sense. We all have work to do, and I definitely still have work to do in terms of work-home balance, but I'm so much better than I used to be, so much better.
Yeah. Wow, that's fascinating actually, because it makes you appreciate the fact that maybe if you do have a regular job and you think moaning about Monday morning isn't that exciting or whatever, but maybe it is something that gives you sort of camaraderie with other people around you. And I never really thought about that on tour you have no schedule that fits any usual person's lifestyle that you can't really relate to, and they can't really relate to you either. So that's really interesting to hear as well. And you mentioned the schedule that sounds grueling for being on tour, which is crazy. Did you have any tips on keeping your energy up, and is that something that's kind of helped you in a time where you have a more regular schedule to have that energy?
You know what? I have tips now, but I didn't back then because I only got into mindfulness after I quit the road. And I wish I would have known. I wish I would have known how important it is to find a routine, even in a crazy schedule like that, to have time for yourself. So my life on the road was quite unhealthy, to be fair, because I struggle from insomnia anyway. So you're so tired. So what do you do to hype yourself up? You're on the Red Bulls, you're on the Coca-Cola, and then right after stage, you need to bring yourself down. So, you're immediately on the booze. Like, just because the emotions are so crazy, especially on so little sleep, that it definitely, for me personally, I quit at the right time.
Yeah.
It wasn't a healthy lifestyle for me. But I feel like if I would ever go back now, I would approach it completely different. So I guess my advice for anyone on the road or that wants to do that, and again, don't get it wrong, being on the road will forever be the high point of my career. That the bond on tour, there's nothing like it. But I would just, encourage people to, just take care of their mental health and make sure you don't overindulge. Take breaks, take time for yourself. It's okay to kind of have days where you're just in the hotel room alone. You don't have to always be part of the action. But to be fair, I feel people nowadays are more clued up. I think we live in a different world where we can talk about these things openly. We can talk about anxiety and burnout and tiredness and mental health and needing space. We can talk about it.
Yeah. No, good point, for sure. So it's good that you've brought these new kind of practices into your life and that they've really helped you with where you are now. So that's great. So now coming into the production and writing side of things that you do, and where do you draw inspiration from when you're writing or producing? And you're working with a lot of artists these days as well. So how much influence do other artists bring to your production specifically as well?
Interesting question. I think people come to me for my sound, right? So I'm quite picky about who I work with in the studio, just because I feel I paid my dues as a session musician. I played with everyone, anyone, and so now at this stage of my career, I want to always be me. So I feel like people know that, people that come to work with me, that come to write with me or whatever, they know that. So of course, we influence each other. But what was really interesting, like, of course, every artist comes with their own sound, with their records they've previously done, artists they're listening to. And at the beginning of sessions, we spend a bit of time listening to their music, listening to their influences, listening to my music, listening to my influences. And in that half an hour, 45 minutes, you're already kind of, a sound gets shaped in your head before I've even touched the piano or the computer, something already happens. But in terms of like where I find my inspiration, I find this question really interesting because I've now realized you don't find inspiration. It's just there. You just have to tap into it. It's always in you, and there are days where it's just not going to happen. And that's when you close the computer and binge on a TV series or whatever. You have a day off, but usually when I coming to the studio is inspiring, seeing people in the hallways inspiring, having my little salad in the cafe is inspiring. Like, life is inspiring, So I find that I listen to a lot of music. I'm a fan of music, So I'm constantly listening. So obviously records inspire me, artists inspire me, the old sounds inspire me, the new sounds inspire me. So I don't really think of inspiration as something that has to be found. It's just there. And then you have different methods of tapping into it. Sometimes I have to admit, it's like at the end of a day and I can't find inspiration, having a cheeky glass of wine and seeing if that loosens up whatever needs to be loosened up, So we all have our methods.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's great. And it's nice to hear that life is inspiring. And I think sometimes people lose that inspiration, and you can find it in so many different places. So that's awesome. And you mentioned when you are working with an artist, you might sit down at a piano or open your DAW. Is there a preference that you have? Like, do you feel more comfortable composing something on a piano because that's your main instrument, or is it different every time?
It's different every time because I cater it to what the artist wants and needs. So a great part of a fascinating part of being a producer is meeting people for the first time and very quickly sussing out how you think they want to work. Some people want to work around the piano and start something from scratch. Other people, especially kind of people more in the rap world, want to just listen to beats, or they want to make a beat on the spot with me, you know? So I'm super open-minded, and I'm at a stage now where I don't really get freaked out anymore. When I first started producing, like making a beat in front of someone was like the scariest thing ever, you know? Whereas now I'm kind of like, it doesn't matter because all we're doing is getting ideas. You know, I can always perfect the sound later. For now, it doesn't matter what kick I use or snare I use. It doesn't matter. You know, we're just trying to get basic patterns down. We're trying to get a vibe. And I can do that on the piano. I can do that on my computer. I can do that with, my machine. It doesn't matter. Whatever, we can do it. Or maybe sometimes I have a guitarist in the room and we just build it around that. But mainly my job is there to make the artist feel comfortable, And it's kind of like, how do you want to work and how can I push you slightly to be your best? So I'm very open-minded at how we start.
Yeah, awesome. That's good to know. And you mentioned, I think I was reading somewhere that you were saying it's really important to keep perfecting your craft. And I think you mentioned it earlier as well. Is there anything particular that you did to keep improving your production and songwriting skills on a regular basis to build that?
Collaborating. When you see other people work, you learn things, So I love being around other producers, especially other producers that, are in the same sequence as I am. So I work on Logic. Because then you immediately think, oh, how did you do that? What's that shortcut? I watch YouTube videos, just anything about, specifically Logic. But I think it's really, again, I really think you learn from other people, So I love being in studios, watching other people work. I have a couple of friends that I go to and we just geek out. So I think it's iron sharpens iron, So being around very talented people always helps. It raises your game, it raises the bar. And I always want to be in those rooms, where I'm constantly being challenged.
Yeah, yeah. That's really good advice and really good takeaways there. So you mentioned collaboration, and that takes us sort of nicely into the next question. So you were saying, or with your collaborators, you seem to collaborate with a lot of sort of songwriters and top liners. And I think you mentioned somewhere that you don't really write lyrics yourself, and you kind of work with other people that do that. Is there any advice that you have on strengthening your skills with other people that can complement that rather than trying to do everything yourself?
Absolutely. So listen, we all have to know what our strengths and weaknesses are. It's fine. Like, I have no problem that I'm not a lyricist. I just surround myself by great lyricists, and I'll always be able to contribute in terms of topics, themes, brainstorming. I will always point out when I think a line could be stronger, but that's why you get experts in. And I love that, especially, and I think especially because of my background as a session musician and being around so many amazing musicians, like, I love bringing in specialists, So if I need a choir arranged, I'll get my choir arranger who's incredible. If I need, Hammond, I'll get my Hammond player. If I need an amazing bass part, of course I could program it in as well. But if I can get my bass player who's just an expert and the best at what they do, then I get them in. So, and to be fair, it took me a second to get here, because when I first started producing, I wanted to do everything by myself, because I was thinking, I have to prove to the world that I'm a producer and I can do everything. And then I calmed down a bit, because you think, just because people are jumping on your track doesn't make it less your track, Like, it's still my vision. I'm still the producer, the buck still stops at me, but you're getting different energies on your track, and it's only going to make the track better, because all of a sudden somebody will play something that you didn't even think about, and you're like, that's actually crazy. Let's add that to this, and actually let's expand on that. So I really think I'm the type of producer that loves getting my experts in. And my experts are my friends as well. So it's a hang too. Do you know what I mean? It's like, and those moments are really beautiful in the studio. I respect my musicians so much because I know how it feels to not be respected, So the second my musicians come in, I don't even tell them what to play. I always start with, what do you hear? And then and then I start kind of shaping and forming it. But I want to hear you on the record. You know, that's why I got you in.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. It's awesome. And you were saying kind of surrounding yourself with people who are great at what they do, and a lot of them are your friends, so it's kind of just a nice time as well. Is there any advice you have on sort of building that community around you? And have these people sort of naturally come into your life through different parts of what you do, or have you kind of gone to seek these people?
You know what? This is a really important question, and I think it's quite an important answer. So many times we try and get into rooms we're not invited in, right? And I used to be like that, and I still sometimes I'm like that. Keep thinking, oh, if only I could work with so and so, and if they could see how great I am, then da 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 da. You know, music is like life. It's got to be genuine. You know, the relationships have to be real relationships. So all the people I work with are people I have either toured with or I've met naturally on my journey. And we ended up working together once, then thinking, oh, wow, this is cool. Working together twice, 3 times, sometimes on their projects, sometimes on my projects. So very equal in many ways, you know? And then your appreciation for each other grows, your friendship grows. And so my little band of musicians, you know, we're just friends as well. And we have a relationship away from music too. And that's so, so, so important. You know, I talked to my bass player, Deshaun Abrahams, about this a lot, about how when you're working with friends, there's never that kind of question of like, oh, is this good enough or not? Because you don't even think like that. I send my musicians the tracks, they just play on it. They don't even ask me, is this for a major label artist? How much is it? They don't ask me because they just trust me. They just jump on it. And within 20 minutes, they send me something back because there's no fear there, you know? Because the second we start doubting ourselves, the second there's fear there, we stop losing our instincts, you know? And we overthink things. And so my advice is nurture the people around you right now. And, you know, like those are the people that you're going to work with forever. And it's a crazy thing for me to think that really people I met at the academy, people I met on the road from a different part of my life, they're still my closest collaborators. And of course, you meet other people along the journey. But you know, the inner circle is the inner circle, and it's like our best friends. They're the people that knew us before we did anything big, you know. So really, and it all boils down to like it's not even music lessons; it's life lessons. Like be a genuine person and respect the friendships and the relationships around you, you know, and invest in them from the bottom of your heart, and it'll come back to you tenfold.
Oh, that's beautiful. And yeah, and really nice thing that you mentioned as well, because I think a lot of people, although I mean networking is so important, I think to keep meeting people as well, but I think so many people seem really daunted by that because they see it as this not genuine thing, but if you see it as actually just making a new friend and not wanting anything from that relationship straight away and just going in to make a new you know, acquaintance and give something before you get anything.
And completely. And again, don't get it wrong. Networking is so important. And like I do at least 2 sessions a week with artists I haven't met before, you know, and that's really important to, you know, to kind of find new artists and find who can be part of like your musical family, but look at it as your musical family, you know? Every producer has one artist that they vibe with. Every artist has one producer that does most of their things, you know? Like there's something special about making music with people you know, people you trust and people you love. Again, there are no rules. This is just the way I live my life now. But I guess having my inner circle gives me the confidence to go to just approach artists, random artists, and say, oh, come to the studio.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
It's all about connections, you know, like genuine human interactions and connections. And at some point, something will happen. And you just got to trust. You got to trust the process.
Yeah. Love it. That's great. That's great. And you know, you have so many incredible people around you, and you've worked with people that are really at the top of their game. Is there something that you would say that we can learn from them as someone who maybe hasn't been around people like that?
The one thing I've learned from all of them is that people at the top of the game have a healthy combination of being crazy hardworking, but not losing their love of it. That's so important. So important. You've got to be excited by it, man. Like, it's so easy for us all to get cynical being in the music industry, because unfortunately, the industry and the business side of it is hard and can be heartbreaking. And yeah, it's not nice, but we can't let it take the joy away from us. And when I think of all the artists that I look up to, and and I'm thinking of Rihanna, Jessie, Stormzy, JP, they love music so much, and they want to improve. They're already at the top of the game, but they constantly want to improve. They're constantly listening to records. They're like, Hannah, have you listened to this? Have you listened to this? Oh, check this out. Oh, that's amazing. I want to try this. There's a childlike excitement there. And I think that's the special sauce, that combination of in a way being grown up and practicing and working on your craft and, being disciplined, but also remembering why we fell in love with music when we were young. That initial spark, we can't lose that. We cannot lose that. It's precious. It's sacred. We have to really hold on to that joy.
Cool. Yeah, it's so easy to lose that joy for it, and it's cool that these people are always so excited by it. Sometimes you think if someone hasn't had a day off, one day off in a year, that they might not be excited by it. So it's really cool that that's not the case. So lastly, what's your biggest tip for someone who's trying to find their musical voice and their sound?
Oof, I don't know if I can only leave it with one tip. As you've probably gathered by now, I can talk forever about this. Okay, so my tip number one is be patient. And it's hard. I hear you guys. It is hard to be patient, especially in this day and age of social media. And it seems like everybody else is doing everything amazingly and getting all the jobs and all the productions and all the awards. And you're not. Be patient. All of our journeys are so individual. And they all take time, and things will come to you when you are ready for it. And you just have to trust that. And it's so hard. But, I look at my life and things came to me at a later stage, They came to me exactly when I was ready for it. So be patient. Number two is don't hide who you are. Be unapologetically yourself. And I know these are things that people always say, but I'm telling you from experience. When I first signed with Sony, the other artists on the label were like super cool dance artists. And I was kind of embarrassed of being like a trained jazz pianist. So I didn't use a lot of pianos in my productions. And nobody had told me this. I just said that to myself. And then later on, one of the guys that ran the label, he's also a DJ, and he played one of my tracks. And like 4 or 5 years later on, he said, oh, and this is Hannah, and she's one of my favorite pianists. And I was thinking, why did I even hide my education and my chops and the fact that I was a jazz musician? Because everybody else was celebrating that. But I just thought, oh, Hannah, it's not cool though. It's not cool. You want, I tried to run away from who I was. And the only person that suffered was me, nobody else. So we are who we are. And now, I am a geek. I don't go out, and I love my studio, I love my computer, I love a bit of a hermit life, and I'm now just gonna admit to it, and I'm gonna be who I am. And what happens is you attract similar people, you attract similar energies, and people just accept you for who you are, and you encourage people to be themselves as well. So you can't run away from who you are. You're always gonna catch up on yourself, So I wish I would have known that earlier. So yeah, that's my other main tip.
Oh, both really, really great tips. So thank you for sharing both of those. And before I let you go, we do have 2 questions from our audience. So
amazing.
We have one from Joe Morgatroyd. So Joe asked, are you a part of working out the live arrangements for your artists? And how do you go about thinking where keys might fit around everything else that's going on with the track with relation to dynamic or frequencies?
Mm-hmm. So I'm not a musical director, so I don't do a lot of live stuff, but I do for JP Cooper. I do kind of all of his kind of live interpretations, live videos, and all of that. And so, yeah, we think a lot about keys, arrangements, sonics, frequencies, looking at the musicians. How can we who are we showcasing and how can we do that best. And to be fair, that's just a conversation between me and JP, me and the artist. You know, we sit down, we decide who we want to have on that certain track, on that certain gig, and then we talk, and then I kind of start arranging things. And so basically it's a lot of preparation. You know, so even a month before we hit the studio to record these, me and JP are sending arrangements back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And I spent days and days and days thinking about who my musicians are, what the arrangement should be, what keys it should be in, you know. So preparation, a lot of preparation, a lot of discussion. And these are all conversations that happen before the musicians even get the tracks. You know, by the time the musicians get the tracks, it's all arranged, it's all done. And of course, I'm always open to like changes, but I've got an idea of what I want.
Cool. Thank you for sharing that. And we have another question from Ramira Abraham. So Ramira asked, what advice do you have for someone who wants to move to producing full time, but struggles to kind of get clientele from indie artists to more major label artists?
So what really helped me was social media. So I started posting beats, me making beats a long time ago, 3 years ago or something like that, 3-4 years ago. And I just kept it up. Once a week, you will see a beat from me. Because for me, first of all, I initially did it because you know, I work a lot in hip hop and R&B as well. And like when I first started, people were like, there's no way you can make hard beats. And so I was like, let me show you, you know? So it came from like, maybe not the healthiest of places, but it ended up being like, I just realized it ended up being a real nice showcase of what I'm working on at the moment, the sounds I'm interested in. So I'd say, show your sound, showcase it on social media, you know? Then hit up artists. Honestly, I just DM people. I love your sound. You want to hit the studio? Done. If out of 10 people, one person responds, and out of 20 people, one person hits the studio, cool. I can work with those odds. You know, like we work in music. Getting a no is we're used to it. You know, 99 no's, 1 yes. That's just the way our industry works. You know, so don't be afraid to slide into people's DMs and say, love what you do. Do you want to come to studio? You know, also, if you don't have a studio, get beat packs ready. You know, so I have links of beats. Specific beats. I've got a hip hop pack. I've got an R&B pack. You know, I've got a more live pack. I've got a piano only pack. So whenever people say, "I'd love to hear your stuff," I'm like, "Okay, cool. Here you go. Bam, done. There. It's in your inbox." You know. So be prepared. Be prepared. You know, it's not about like forcing people to listen to your stuff or anything like that, but it's about being prepared. We work in an industry that's oversaturated, where there's a lot of producers around, there's a lot of sounds, there's a lot of noise. So you have to kind of be prepared for all eventualities. And you got to put yourself out there a bit, you know? So nowadays, like a lot of times, you know, like people just like hear my beats and pick them straight from my socials. Give me a call. It's like, Hannah, can you send me that? You know? So it's turned. But it took me a long time to build that up. So showcase yourself. Don't be afraid. It's not showing off, showing what you can do. You're just showing what you can do.
Cool. Love it. Thanks so much for that, Hannah. That's been incredible. And I know I've got so much from it. So I'm sure our audience will as well. So what have you got for the rest of your day?
So today I've got to go to the studio and set up a new laptop with one of my geek friends who's going to help me. Again, your friends are important. I'm getting a new laptop set up, you know, so...
nice.
So that's quite a tech-heavy day today.
Yeah.
Making sure all my drives work and all my backing up systems are sorted out, all of that.
Okay, cool. All right. Well, that's exciting. New laptop is always exciting. So enjoy that, Hannah, and thank you again. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Awesome. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.